Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. The first hour is general discussion, media, and virtual production every day, 7 days a week. You can come and ask your questions. If you follow, go what we call going up the mountain, across the rickety bridge, and through the forest, and you can find out how to do that at officehours.global. And today we're going to be talking, second hour is things we would like to spend a little more time on. Today we're going to talk about audio, just general questions about audio, more questions about audio if you have them. So go ahead and throw those in, and general questions. If you have some other ones, you can slip in there as well. Tomorrow we're going to have Neural Net on, so that'll be a lot of fun. And Neural Net is another way to bring people in as remote guests, and so we'll be seeing how that has been progressing over the last year. Thursday we have Michael Krasny. Michael Krasny is actually what the second hour is based on. So he did for 30 years. He did a KQED, the NPR station here, and did a thing called Forum, and I listened to it a lot. And so that's kind of where the format kind of evolved for second hour. And then on Friday we have MakerPipe. So MakerPipe is going to, the folks from MakerPipe are going to be on talking to us about how it works and how they got started. And then, of course, Saturday is the long day. We'll have education, which is just a great discussion every day, every week. We don't put that on YouTube. You have to have the Zoom link. And then at noon, we're going back to the Accidental Theater in Belfast for the Belfast Method, remote takeover. So we'll be doing that at noon, and there's separate links for that in the emails that go out every morning. Then, of course, Sunday, we're looking at doing another cooking. We're working on that, and but that'll be at 9 a.m. if it happens. Otherwise, it's just general discussion. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions, Bill.
Our first one comes from TJ Asher this morning, Alex, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and often on the panel. And he says, while watching Dennis build a supersource background in motion with Alex 4D advising, Dennis asked if the background should be subdued and dark or instead be bright and vibrant for HDR. What are the panel's thoughts on supersources and their background intensity?
Go ahead, Alex.
I apologize if I'm out of sync, but I'm having some technical problems. So if you can bear with me. In my opinion, I think the background should be generally dark. With maybe if you're going to do HDR, just have a few glints here and there, little shiny elements, very small things, sparkles. I know that it's a good idea to keep them moving, because obviously there's a problem with burn-in for HDR, and also, yeah, that's kind of it in terms of and come up with textures which don't have too many gradients in them, obviously, because gradients don't encode well even now. So yeah, that's just my thoughts. But as I'm out of sync slightly, I think I'll stop there.
I think the gradients should get better as we get to our full 10-bit system. So a 10-bit pipeline through it, we should be able to get away with better gradients than we've had in the past. But you're right that that's a little bit challenging sometimes. In the same way that we think of LUFS as kind of this average, one of the things we want to think about, I've been thinking about this, we want to think about the average brightness of an image. And we probably want to find average brightnesses for backgrounds for super sources of like, oh, it should be about this value overall. So if we took the overall value of the image, it should be definitely 2 stops darker than most of the subjects. But it could have, to your point, really bright areas, that are surrounded by darker areas. But I do think I do find it interesting. I feel like people get pushed back into the screen when it's bright. Also, when there's a lot of bright, one thing that I noticed yesterday, the day before in the tests, or maybe it was last week, and something we have to be conscious of here, we can't share white web pages in HDR. Can't do it. Like, it's painful. Like, it's just like a whack in the eye. White, a white web page, if it's not in dark mode or it's not a darker image, we won't be able to jump to it. And it's just something that I didn't think about until I was like, now that we're getting it tuned, every time a white page comes up that's shared, it just kind of like whacked me in the eyes, just from my phone. And I know that it'll get worse because it's so much brighter. That in the way that it comes out. So it's something that we have to kind of be conscious of when we're sharing products, and our graphics and everything else we'll need to kind of take into account the fact that, like that kind of thing will probably
be not like something. This.
Exactly. If you watch the thing, so if your phone is on full brightness and you look at that, it's really bright. So white is not our friend when it comes to this stuff. So it'll just change the way we think about graphics. And again, we're doing something that no one's ever done before with HDR. So we're going to learn a bunch of new things. And one of them is that large portions of white is probably not our best friend. Go ahead, Chris.
I always like the idea of quantifying aesthetics. And I think what you're talking about in terms of like the background
Yep.
Versus the foreground, how many stops different, that makes a whole lot of sense. But think about how much tech stuff is on a white web page. If you want to make the rule, we can't share a web page that's white, I'm going to bet that's 85%.
But if I want to show an image, we can't show someone's page where you can buy something. But what we can do is grab that image, auto alpha it in Keynote, put it over a background, and put a price next to it. So like that's what we have to kind of get
Carl
to.
it.
Carl it. Yeah, we need to Carl it. Do a Carl cut. We'll do a Carl cut. There we go. So
dubbed right now. What's the date?
It's the Carl
December
cut.
7th.
Yeah, so it's got to be a Carl cut. It can't be a and it's with a K, I think. The cut.
With a K.
The Carl cut.
No, that just feels like
it's got to be something else. It's got to be
Toys R Us.
Yeah, we got to think of something. Okay, we got to think about it though. There's a go ahead, George.
So this is very interesting as far as backgrounds go, because so often we see a lot of virtual productions that the backgrounds are moving, and the Office Hours 2.0 looks really good in the dark mode, and I really love it. And I guess I fight with that a lot, whether it's do motion or a background with a lot of elements or just a solid background. So it's interesting that this topic is now coming up as we move forward and the industry moves forward.
We haven't put a lot in the background yet because we haven't gotten to it, but there definitely will be some moving backgrounds, stuff moving in the background. We just haven't done it yet. so there will be, I think that's good. I think that we want to have that. There's places that, the more we do it, the more I think about where HDR makes sense. And one of the things that's going to make sense for us, I think, is number one is having little glints that are very bright. The other thing is having lots of subtle detail in the dark areas. So imagine kind of moody things that are moving in the background. Those are things that in SDR you might not be able to see. And in HDR, you'll see this kind of layering of things and things popping out. And so, again, I think there's an incredible opportunity for us to use this on a day-to-day basis. I got pulled into a concert this week, and so I've been a little hectic. But one of the things I want to do is use some graphics like the closing area, the countdown clock, maybe some pre-show stuff to play with how far I can push the HDR specifically. Not so much design, just like brightness and graphics. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just thinking, because most of the time, if I'm going to show something, if I'm talking about like a particular microphone, my go-to place obviously is Amazon to find it, to be able to show it to people. But that's going to be a white background. There's no way that comes across in reverse mode.
Yeah, we don't have to link to Amazon.
So we're not going to do it. Okay, good.
Yeah, which is not we just have to, and again, my goal right now is to get teams involved. So there's, in a perfect world, at some point, there's 2 or 3 people on every show that are just working on the graphics, and they look down the thing and they go, oh, they're going to talk about this. Let's go grab an image of that. Let's go grab an image of this. Let's put it into Keynote, and do whatever. But we won't be able to. There's some point in 2.0 where the panelists never share a screen, like unless they're showing us how to do something that's on their, so they're not showing, they'll never show us a web page. Like, so that'll be, that's where we're going to be going, is that panelists may show us how to do something. They may show us an interface the way Guy shows us, like how to do a hardware interface, or this is how vMix looks, or whatever, but they're not going to post a web page. That'll be something that the team does. Good Guy.
How about if I just, in vMix, I could just slam it down, to 245 white or 235 or something like that. So that as that input comes in, it'll just automatically knock it down.
Yeah, it's more like 170. so it's it'll look gray. The thing is, on SDR, where a lot of people are watching, it'll look gray. It just the whites won't look great. That's and again, I think that I'm more interested in figuring out a pipeline that has us be more refined anyway than just jumping to pages if we can. So over time. There you go. Yeah.
So how about like that? Here's your page.
Yeah. Well, it's something that we just need to test. That's something we need to play with. Go ahead, Alex.
I don't know if I could share my screen because I don't have a switcher. I have to ask to share that screen. It's just an idea for a countdown clock. I hope Aaron doesn't mind. I kind of was sharing it in the Office Hours 2.0 group. Can I share my screen?
Mitchell would have to hand that to you quickly.
Well, I'm sorry about this.
So, yeah, it's like Mitchell, you're asking a new editor to do something that he hasn't done before.
Oh, forget it. It's not. It's not.
Yeah, like so anyway, yeah, I think that we'll come back to that. But yeah, you're playing with some ideas.
Yeah, no, he's done it. So I'm just going to show you what I mean. Sorry. So this is an idea of a very subtle background, which is a grid. And then the idea is that everything's white. This is white and that is white. But then as we get to 30 seconds, the second hand gets brighter and brighter and brighter until it's now much brighter, if you see what I mean.
Right.
So it's a kind of concept for not much of the screen being HDR, but just a tiny important part of it.
Yeah, I think I think what we should do is use that clock as an experiment. Remember, we always have to remember that clock has got to be like 15 minutes long. so anyway, so you know when we render it out, what is it going to look like for 15 minutes? But the other thing is that I think that we want to do something. I think playing around with subtlety is good. My experiments will probably be playing around with like, how can we get your eyes to pop? You know, like just go, wow, that looks amazing on an HDR screen. And so, and I've done some tests already on some. I've done it for other shows that I've worked on, and there's some stuff that you can do. Some of the like the 3D text with some of the glints and everything else, and then just some basic stuff in the background looks pretty cool. So we'll keep playing with it. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Tobias Moss, and Tobias is in Minneapolis and asks, does adapting a USB 3.0 device to a USB-C port introduce reliability problems? What are the best practices? And he's specifically interested in mics, webcams, the Stream Deck, and so forth.
Go ahead, Jason.
All right, I get to pull a Mickey. It depends. Long story short, USB 3.0 has a maximum throughput of 5 megabits per second, and that's half of USB-C. So probably, but the real pipeline issue that you're going to have, I think, is on an older USB bus. So that's more of what I would be concerned about.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So each different hub will have a different chipset in it. Some, like for instance, some will have a DisplayPort chipset into it. Some will have a different brand into it. That's why a lot of these older hubs stopped working once Mac started updating their software. They were very reliable, and then all of a sudden the next version of Mac came out, and then they came out with problems left and right because the chipset doesn't get updated as well. There's a lot of reliable companies that work with companies like Mac and Windows to try and make these chipsets really work for them. So that's why you want to go with a reliable like OWC, because you know where they're what's going to be inside. Their architecture is going to be something that they've talked to companies like Apple about to make sure that it's going to work for there. With that said, there are some docks that basically have a primary port and a secondary port. Like for instance, I have a smaller dock with 3 USB ports into it, and I know that if I want the one that's going to take out the most juice out of that dock, I'm going to plug into a specific what I call the first USB port. It's going to depend once again on which dock you have, which port you have, if it's powered, if it's not powered. All these things come into play when it comes to that. So once again, trusted stuff like OWC is probably the best, your best bet for something like a Mac.
Next question.
Next one comes from James Hutchinson in Dublin, Ireland, and he said nobody in the panel seems to use Nikon or Nikon kit anymore. Why is that?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I would say that it's the ecosystem of the lenses. If you grew up with having that ecosystem from stills, then a lot of people transitioned over to Nikon. I had a D800 and I had a few Nikon lenses, or Nikon as some people like to say. And during that phase when they had clean HDMI, and they were one of the only folks that did, they picked up a lot of new users. But with Blackmagic and with Red and all these guys coming out with price points lower than this Z9 is $5,499. It'll do 8K. I know that Atem has been working with them to do some really interesting stuff with the new Ninja 5 Plus. So they do have some interesting technology. I just think that Canon, with that mount getting adapted onto the pocket cinema cameras, really changed folks' shift over to those lenses. So I think that that's where we're at. Is Canon's just dominating.
Go ahead, Bill.
I've always thought that Canon, this research and development thing, that Canon took this change when they had a happy accident take place. And it was back when the first original 5D came out, and they had upgraded their processor to what they called their Digic processor. They're now like Digic 5 or 6 or 7. But one of their engineers, this is a story I heard, possibly apocryphal, but that the engineer figured out that they could do 30 frames a second video out of it because it was fast enough. And even though nobody had asked for that feature, they put it in the camera, and suddenly the marketplace discovered that you had a still camera that could do clean looking, beautiful video with really solid blacks. And it just swept through almost as a consumer driven thing, the marketplace. And a lot of us bought those cameras to start doing early digital video on them. And then Canon did not drop the ball. Not only did they follow that, but they threw a lot of R&D money into video, and you finally got the C100, 200, 300 series, and they really embraced it. In fact, I heard they opened a big shop in Hollywood to kind of service the low end of the motion picture making market. And I think it's always been an object lesson to me that sometimes those happy accidents, one engineer saying, we can do this, they didn't tell me to do this with this processor, but I can do it. I can get video out of this still camera, can create decades of profit and innovation in a company if you just follow those great moments.
Yeah, the funny thing about it was that when we saw it and we got really excited, and everyone started complaining about the fact that it didn't do 2997. That became a big deal when we first got them, because I bought 3 of them almost immediately, and we started shooting with them. We started shooting interviews because we had short depth of field. I mean, the video quality was pretty bad. I mean, as far as the compression and everything else, but if you got the lighting just right, you get this great short depth of field. And all of us went to this super short, like you just couldn't get enough of it. And that became kind of this weird look that all of us created. Anyway, but the interesting thing is I was talking to someone at Canon about it, and they were like, yeah, the video team and the photo team don't talk to each other at all because they don't want to cross-pollinate, or there was some reason that they didn't want to do that. And so when he came up with it, he had no idea that 2997 existed. Like it was like, he just thought, well, I'll just do it. It's 30 frames a second, and he just put it into the camera, but because they don't talk to the video team, and it became like a huge thing for them to figure out how to make that actually work. And they didn't think about, the idea of having to clean, like, why would you want a fully clean feed out of the camera? It was just a lot of things that the video team could have told them if they had talk to each other. but they didn't. So it's such a big company, it just, and for some reason that I know that there was a reason that they weren't allowed to. So it was a interesting thing. All right, next question.
James Hutchinson, Dublin, Ireland, is right back again with the start time of office hours has been slipping lately. Is it hope to bring it back in line soon?
Yeah, it's all my fault. so I if we start the mic check, my little morning schedule is so tight that if we start the mic checks late, I'm usually a couple minutes late because there's so many things that I have to do between the two. So I need to get better at just starting the mic checks on time. So we just need to start the mic checks at 6:43, and the other thing is that there's a lot of moving parts on our end, so we kind of fiddle about with things because of the Office Hours 2.0 stuff that more than we did, and we're handing things off like the edit to new people, and we kind of spend a little time explaining it and stuff like that. But yeah, I apologize. I've been thinking about it recently that I gotta pull it in. so anyway, it's my fault. Anyway, we'll get it worked out. Next question.
Danny Law in Malaysia is up next, and Danny asks, what type of lens lets you control the zoom on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro from the Atem Mini Extreme ISO?
Go ahead, Jason.
Guy and I got to the bottom of this a long time ago, one night, and what was it, like $3,000, Guy? Something like that. There's exactly one lens that we managed to come up with, and yeah, long story short, none really.
The one that you can use is a is a Fujinon Cabrillo lens with an external motor can do it.
Oh boy. Okay. How much, Alex?
Yeah, it's a 10 grand. It's the little one. So anyway, next question.
Next question for the real wallets among us. Tobias Moss in Minneapolis say, is it still the case that a phone call joining a Zoom meeting will degrade the quality for all? How do we prevent this but still allow phone-in access?
Go ahead, Andrew.
So coincidentally, Jeff Wingren from the Zoom Test Kitchen DM'd me just this morning about this very issue. And I'm going to just quickly read what he wrote. which is, Andy, I wanted to let you know that we tested the stereo to mono bug when a phone dial-in user joined the meeting. We have confirmed that the stereo was never affected when a dial-in user connected. We sent that caller to the waiting room, brought them back, as well as having them disconnect and reconnect to the meeting. And then he goes on to ask, if we can validate this. So I think we should validate this at some point.
I'm pretty sure we have. I think we did this a little while ago. Yeah,
oh, yeah. Okay, good.
There was an update, I think maybe a month ago or 6 weeks ago that we think fixed it. We reported it. A couple of us filed tickets, and it appeared that it got fixed, a while ago. I don't remember exactly when, but it was. And so I know that a bunch of us have tested it and haven't seen the same behavior again. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So it shouldn't affect it now. It's more of a Zoom thing than our thing. And hopefully Zoom will keep going down that path and we'll get 514 or 916. All right, next question.
Michael Andreas in Olathe, Kansas in the U.S. says, what features does Keynote have that make it better than PowerPoint or other presentation software besides that it runs on a Mac?
I go, John.
I've used both for years. Keynote is so superior. The Instant Alpha is a huge feature that I use quite a bit. So does Chris Fenwick. And the ability to add video, and coming soon USDZ, it'll be great.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Those are the ones that really make our socks roll up and down as hardcore nerds. But even if for simple presentations, just the animation and the interface, it is truly a design engine intended for presentation. So for example, the anti-aliasing in the fonts, even with an identical slide, is going to look better. The movement is going to look better. Even if you do exactly the same movement, it is in every way superior.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, one of the things I've experienced, which made Keynote so much better than using PowerPoint, is the fact that it embeds differently. So I've never had a problem if somebody embedding video or graphic content in Keynote, but I can't tell you the number of times we've sent a project to somebody outside in a PC world using PowerPoint, and they have all sorts of trouble relinking whatever it was that was put on that slide page. It's failed more times than I can tell you.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot. I mean, for a long time, there was about a 5-year period where every presentation we did on every stage was done in Keynote. So if you gave it to us in slides, or gave it to not me, but the company that we were working with, and whatever it was, these are giant events, even for companies that make their own slide systems, and they'd all get converted to Keynote just because it was much more stable. The playback was much better. Animations between slides were smoother. As Jason said, the kerning, line spacing, and anti-aliasing out of the gate is better. And so there's a feeling of refinement. And I got to say, the Instant Alpha, I probably use 10, 15 times a day, like a day. It is like you grab an image, you throw it in, you hit Insta Alpha, and then you set it to where you need it to go, and you do it all the time. And when you get used to it, you can't not. The other things that are coming up are the live video that I've started to incorporate into some of my slide decks. It's a little bit tricky for me to get it all working the way I want to in Zoom, but it is really effective. I think if Keynote adds virtual camera in and virtual camera out, it'll take it to a whole different level, and then you add USDZ. So, and I don't even think of Keynote, like I'm going to post a video either next week or the week after that I'm going to do the whole video I'm going to maybe edit it a little bit, but I'm going to otherwise do the whole video in Keynote. I'm doing it to dog food for teachers. So I decided I'm going to start doing all my Mac break picks, hopefully starting next week, or it might be the week after. All my Mac break picks will get done in Keynote. Like I'll do a little video about why I picked it. And it's mostly just so that I can, I'll release the Keynote docs as well. Like here's the thing I put on YouTube, and here's actually the Keynote doc that I use to build it, so that people can see what I'm doing with that. And some of them aren't going to be complicated, but you can literally build videos in Keynote. There's no reason why you can't do a lot of this stuff there. It's at a whole different level. Yeah. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas is up next. He says, is any of the deep fake technology used in Peter Jackson's Get Back documentary on the Beatles available to us mere mortals?
There's some pieces of it. I don't think, are they really using deep fake technology? I don't think they are. I think they're just using upres.
Yeah, I was watching it. They're using a lot of artificial intelligence to break down mixes, particularly because the camera, they didn't run great audio on all of it. And the audio, even in the earliest parts of their rehearsal in Twickenham Studio, sounds amazingly clean. So I think they used a lot of AI to go in and break up those original mono recordings and isolate individual, like I heard Ringo's drums were not mic'd very well. So they had to separate out through AI everything but the drum sounds and then bring them forward to get a decent mix. And those mixes sound brilliant.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
There's a TechCrunch article out there that actually came out a day or two ago that did talk about how the deepfakes were added to bring in specifics on grainy video and things like that. I noticed, I did notice a little bit and get back, like for instance, Ringo Starr, he has a weird thing on his eyebrow, and every now and then his eyebrow was way thinner than what I remember. It felt like he shaved his eyebrows off. So I saw a few things that really made me wonder if there was some deep fakes being used. But this article, I'll find it and post it in Mukana, is where that's probably coming from.
The one that I really am interested in is when people post a lead singer's voice completely separated from the tracks. Like I know that you can do some of that just by, just through some channel operations, but they get it with all the resonance and everything else. And it really sounds good. And I'm always amazed at how, and that's some kind of AI that I don't understand. So I hope somebody comes on the second hour and shows us that. All right, next question.
Stefan Lindholm in Albo, Finland, it looks like, says, what's the origin of the name Mukana? In Finnish, it means together. Wondering if that is a happy accident.
It's not. So Stefan, when I saw you ask a question earlier, I was like, I wonder when he's going to bring up Mukana. So Mukana has two different. It comes from two. It's the same word that I feel is very similar both in Finland and in Zimbabwe of all things. So in Finland, you're right that it means together, and it was something that I liked a lot. It also means a place good for serving for executing a purpose in Shona, which is in Zimbabwe. So I liked the fact that both name meant something to us in both languages was kind of cool. So anyway, that's when I wrote it down 5 years ago or whatever. That's what I did a lot of research in the fact that both of them did that. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Anyway, that's it. Next question.
Tobias Moss in Minneapolis up next with, anyone notice Facebook's new function as a podcast publisher and player? And if so, what's your take?
They've talked about that for years that they were going to make that available. And so I haven't played with it now. I mean, we were really excited about it when it was bouncing around. And so I'm glad that it came out. I think that it makes a lot of sense. I think that it'll be interesting to see how it works. I mean, I think that one of the real powerful things there is the possibility of mixing Facebook Live and being able to take comments and so on and so forth. I think we might be past some of that. We might be able to do that on our own. But back then, when we first started talking about it, the idea that you could have a live interaction with folks and take questions and then post it as a podcast made sense. The only question that we had is really, does a podcast mean something different? Like, do you really want to listen to conversation for 2 hours that's recorded as opposed to something that's more produced? And I go back and forth because the only thing that I absolutely listen to, often are ones that are highly produced, so This American Life and Radio Lab, those types of things are the things that I tend to listen to, and they're really, really tightly produced. And so I'm just not sure which way that would go. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, it's important to know that this is just an aggregator. This is not a way that you can get your podcasts out to people, because podcast purists say that a podcast has to have an RSS feed that you can link to it. They want you to take your RSS feed from your web page and your podcast and aggregate it into their system. So it's kind of like Stitcher did back in the day.
Sure. I don't know if that makes sense. Go ahead, Jason.
So what you're saying is they just figured out how to take an RSS feed that they didn't create using standards they didn't invent to basically just take album art and make it look pretty, so you stay on the Facebook tab. Well, the advantage is if you have a lot of followers or if you have a lot of social push in Facebook, being able to do a podcast there would make sense, because it would you could more easily translate that
because you pay a penalty anytime you do in Facebook, Twitter, etc. Do an external link, and you pay a penalty in not only that link, but many links afterwards. Like, posting a YouTube link on Twitter, I know that my entire stats will go down for a week.
Yeah, you get negative credit.
It is like like posting an external link to from one social network to another is a great way to not have anyone follow you.
You get negative credit.
Yeah.
I don't know. The cynic in me just couldn't help but point that out.
Yeah. Next. So that's why it makes sense, though, is that you would put it in. What Facebook wants you to do is make it a citizen of their thing, not that you link out somewhere else, but that you bring it into what they're doing, so they can track you. Next question.
Jason Panks in Nashville is up next, and he asks, I've been asked to help film a wedding ceremony for a friend. Tips for recording audio, particularly mics, and how many cameras should I plan?
Guy?
I would say the best gift you can give is to have a professional do this, because you're dipping into a place where there's a lot of failure that can occur. There's a reason why these guys have these really cool gimbals and multiple cameras that match and second shooters and batteries galore. There's a lot of things that can go wrong in a wedding. That being said, I've done a couple, and if you for friends, and that's the other thing, is Bridezilla can come after you for making a mistake. So this is a one-shot deal. If you screw it up, it's on you. So I would hire a professional. But if you really want to, 3 matching cameras, hire a sound guy if you can. If not, then I like the G4s from Sennheiser. Get a better mic like a Sanken Cost 11 or a DPA. And then I would say the other one would be a Rode Wireless Go, but check the venue. If you're using the Sennheiser, do a auto scan first thing when you get there. Have a video up that shows you how to walk through the auto scan, because you're walking into dangerous territory if you don't know what you're doing as far as like busy RF zones. So there's a lot that's there, and why professionals do this for a living and make big bucks.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Everything Guy said. And the one thing I mentioned too is that put an Omni mic on the groom, usually not the bride, because before the wedding, the bride is, secluded, sequestered, and it can be difficult to get to them and all of that. And an Omni mic will pick up the bride, the groom, and whoever is running the wedding, who's ever doing that part of it. The other thing I would say is don't put that mic into a PA system, because it's an Omni. Make that a separate system if you're going to do that. And then the third thing I'll say is I got turned on to this. This is if you have to put a mic on a piece of clothing and you don't want to puncture that piece of clothing or clip to it, this is an eyeglass reader holder thing. It's magnetic. And this is like $12 on Amazon, versus if you bought the professional version of this from the mic manufacturer, it would cost 3 or 4 times as much. This is the company. I'll put it in the Mukana.
Go, Jason.
Oh, both of those were wonderful answers. I cannot stress again everything that Guy said about the fact that this is more than a favor. This is something where you have to be very certain that you can absolutely do it. I don't want to reiterate, so the only thing that I'll add to it is if you can tap into house sound, have it available. And I'd say the officiant is your best placement for a microphone, other than house sound. But yeah, this is a tricky one, and you better not be getting him a wedding present.
All right, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, whenever we are forced to do weddings, we use at least 3 cameras. And a good idea is to record the audio into the camera. That way everything's already in sync if you have that ability. And don't mic the bride. And what these guys said earlier. Bye.
Yeah, so I mean, the other thing to think about is that beyond the technology of it, it's a game of logistics. There are a lot of moving parts, and you actually want to pay attention. I did 400 weddings, so in another life, and I was a DJ, but I was the one managing those logistics oftentimes, and so I dealt with the videographers. You want to be whoever's running that, whoever's got the mic controls the show, and you got to remember that what you do will be paid attention to later. What they do is paid attention to right now. So the DJ or the MC or whoever, they're getting paid for how people feel at the moment, and they will interact with you. But if you don't follow along, they're just going to run you over, because they're the ones with the mic. So when they say, so what you want to do is you want to know what time are we doing you want to make sure that you're way ahead of obviously the ceremony, but like for instance, is the ceremony in the same place, and how fast are you going to get back there? Because you're going to want the entry of the bride and groom coming in. You're going to want to get the wedding line. You're going to want to then obviously be ready for the cutting of the cake, the garter toss, the first song, and you need to think about, where will I be when I do those things, like, so where will I, you're trying to get to those locations, and it really turns into something that all you're thinking about is setting up for the next thing. You can't have enough batteries or enough tape or enough memory or whatever you're going to do. You can't have enough. Like, there's so many, you're just going to keep on going through them. You need an assistant. Do not shoot a video show without someone to help you. I've watched lots of videographers try that, and it doesn't work. You need someone to be able to go run and get stuff for you. And then the main thing though is that you got to capture, they're not going to remember all the other stuff. You got to capture all the things that they think of, like that, the cutting of the cake and everything else. And you have to think about what angle they're going to be at. The person you're going to negotiate there with is the photographer, because the photographer, oftentimes, if they're paying the photographer and asking you to help, it means the photographer is going to decide what angle is being lit, how they're going to stand. And you want to talk to them all the time to A, make sure that you're not in their shots, and B, coordinate that process. So just remember that it's not you just going to cover a show. It's you working with the catering team, the DJ, the photographer, to kind of figure out where you're going to be in all those key moments so that you can capture the footage. If you get the key footage, all the other stuff is you just kind of pick up people having fun. But don't do that, and then back up quickly as soon as you get done. Or, all right, next question.
Michael Andreas in Olathe, Kansas says, Kansas says, what's the reason for office hours, basically a talking head show, going to HDR? Seems to me that the scene dynamic range for this content is low and controllable.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I just say, yes, it is a talking head show, but it's I think way more than that. And what's been surprising to me, having been involved in office hours since pretty early, is that it is really a technology test bed, both in a real and theoretical way. We talk about things that we sometimes don't know how to do because we're all pushing ourselves to become better at things like that. And what Alex has arranged here, particularly in the back end of this, is a way to test what's coming and see what's practically possible and what is not. So yes, the presentation is talking heads, but behind the scenes, there's so much learning going on that has nothing to do with just answering questions. Although we are delighted to be answering questions and hope that is of service to the audience, there's so much more going on behind the scenes.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, because it's awesome. And if you're like me, and I would assume a fair bit of the panel, doing is the best way to learn.
Yeah, there's a lot that I get at. I mean, I do a lot of HDR production, and I have usually a couple more tools than what we have now to do that. And the big thing is I've learned more doing this about HDR, about what works, what doesn't, how it works, what makes sense, doing this than I've done with all the paid events that I've done, because I get to see. It's funny. What's happened for me is all these different windows. I see things that work and don't work as people put those things up, and as people put up graphics, and as people put up other things. I will say that, by the way, I don't know if people should look at the test stream on a larger monitor than your phone. I just put it on my iPad. We converted to 4K today, and it just doesn't look like Zoom. I mean, that's the one thing I will say, is that it's really popping out with the new setup. So anyway. The game that I'm playing, I will admit that the game that I played since I was a little kid is that I just do everything way over the top. Like there is no, first of all, the rule is you can never go too far. And so I think that it allows us to get good at stuff long before, and everything I've done for the last 20 years has been doing things that everyone goes, that doesn't make any sense. I don't know why you would do that right now. And then I generated, a bunch of things from that, because I learned, because we have a lot of people paying attention to the show because we're doing HDR, so we just have to, that gets us in a whole different level. And it wasn't worth doing until the panelists did what they did, which is create these incredible frames and, upgrade all of their systems and look great in all these other places. It wasn't worth doing. But now a lot of people look really, really good, and this is just a general step up. Now, if somewhere down the road Zoom decides to go to 10-bit and decides to go to 4K, decides to go to, you know, whatever those things are years from now, you know, that'll be just something we just flip a switch and suddenly it looks even that much better. And, you know, my goal from a broadcast perspective is, as we go into 2.0, is that when people see it, broadcasters can't just turn it off and go, well, that's just Zoom. You know, we want it to look as good or better than their shows, you know, at a higher resolution, at a higher color space, at a, you know, with great graphics and all the other things, so that it just gets to be very hard to ignore, you know, what we're doing here. And I think that we are doing something special. And I think that pushing that outer envelope allows us to learn, but it also allows us to put us in a place that your average Zoom meeting does not get to. Next question.
Jeffrey Powers in Madison, Wisconsin's up next. And Jeffrey asked, best camera head for a teleprompter. With a smaller camera, the weight distribution is now a problem for the tripod.
Go ahead, George.
So this is what I'm using right now for my setup. This is the Matthews BH30. It's rated for about 39 pounds. It's pretty flexible. Let me just show you. This is my setup right now for this particular, for office hours and everything that I do. So it's mounted back there. It's pretty lightweight. It's mounted behind, it's on the desk of itself on the monitor mount. So it works pretty good in this setup. It'll work the same way for a tripod, and it's easy. I have a longer plate in there right now, which is a 12-inch plate. So it's easy for me to move everything back and forth and keep everything in line. This is what you're seeing right now. That's my prompter. So again, it'll handle more than 39 pounds, but this is way lighter than 39 pounds. So this is my setup right now. And the BH30 pretty much does the trick for me.
And the plate is the key. It's not so much the head, it's the plate. A long plate is what makes the difference. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, because I had a tripod that I was using for the teleprompter, but then I started putting the smaller, like the Brio, into the teleprompter for the camera, and then all of a sudden the glass side just started getting heavy, started to droop down. I noticed that it was pulling out from the little clip mount there. That's why I was really thinking that having a little bit more sturdy of a head, and I have a pretty sturdy head that I use for that. So I'm just.
Mm-hmm. You don't want to,
I'm just trying to figure out the best.
Even if it's a steady head, you don't want to actually do that because it will damage your fluid head. So constantly pulling forward or backward on a head is really bad for it. And they will literally start to bleed the fluid, you know, if they're getting pulled against that. So the fluid will start coming out of the fluid head. So it is super important to be balanced. So anytime I put a camera down, I got to figure out a way. Now, George is a little different because he's using a C-stand. So, but or at least that's what it looked like there when I looked at it. So it doesn't have the same issues. But if you're using a fluid head, you need a long plate that you can move back, you know, forward and back. The head itself is less important, but the plate it sits on is really important so that you can distribute that. I always turn my tension all the way down and open it up, and I move my whole rig until I can just let go and it'll just balance. Then I tighten everything back up again. And now I know that it's in balance. You can actually go over the rated amount for a tripod as long as you keep it super balanced. I don't recommend that, but I'm just saying in a pinch you can do it, but you got to keep it balanced. It's a huge piece of a tripod.
A long sliding plate. Yeah, because the Blackmagic was usually weighting the other side. So yeah, that'd be okay.
Just get a long plate. Yep. Yeah. And a lot of us have those, like these dove plates that are really long that, you know, I have ones that are 18 inches long for bigger cameras, just so that you can make those adjustments as you balance it out. Yeah. Next question.
Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany is up next, and he says, will the use of Zoom rooms enhance the quality of an audio-video recording done by Zoom?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, so the typical Zoom meeting that's free is 360p, and if you record that, it's going to look scaled up, so it's 640 by 360. And a Zoom room for $49 a month, if you get one of those and install the software on a PC, you could then invite that. These are typically in a conference room, and that Zoom room will then upscale that, or not upscale, to actually be native 1280 by 720, so we call it 720p. So it's a way to get better recordings, but the real best way is to just reach out to Zoom support and ask for a 1080p account, and that way you can even go higher than what a Zoom room can do. So reach out to support. I'll put a link in the Mukana chat.
Next question.
Stefan Lindholm in Albo, Finland is next, and he asks, what is the next video audio accessory on the shopping list for the panel members?
Go ahead, John.
I'm preparing for Retro Day on office hours where we look as bad as we possibly can. And so I'm going to buy one of these Barbie cams and a Mr. Microphone, and I'll be all prepared for Retro Day.
There you go. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Well, for me, it's a sliding plate for camera head.
Yeah, there you go. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, for me, it's that NTech that John Preto has. I've been playing with Universe, and so I need to get that to be able to control this mix panel with DMX, and I want to put one in the studio so from afar we can control the lights. We've been putting this PTZ camera in after hours that people can play with, but I want to put some lights so that people could dim the key light, the fill light, the background light, so it'll be fun to be able to control that all through DMX. And I also noticed that in Sienna's NDI monitor that there's a way, I was talking with Andy about it, that you could control DMX over NDI, so I'm interested in trying that as well. So DMX NTech controller that seems to be out of stock right now.
All right, go ahead, Jason.
I'm still chuckling over the Barbie webcam. I'd say my next thing is going to be that foot pedal that we saw yesterday on office hours. I have one already, and I don't love it. So whoever pointed that out, if they're in the panel, I would love to see that again in Mukana.
Go ahead, Doug.
I have so many, it would take a whole second hour.
It's a long list.
I rightfully named my company Never Ends Productions because the equipment bleed never ends. You can ask my wife.
Hey, I once had a 10,000 foot warehouse that just said it should have just had a picture of it never ends. You just keep buying stuff. Go ahead, George.
X-Touch for my X32. That'll be the final piece of the Dante puzzle until something else comes up in January that he spends more money on.
I already bought the foot pedals. I bought them while we were talking about them. so the foot pedals are on their way. I was like, oh, I need that. For me, well, I guess what I would say is what I wish for as opposed to what I'm probably going to buy. Usually what I'm buying are like lots of little things, but what I really want is the DJI, either both the new drone as well as the new Ronin. The Ronin, I just keep on watching reviews of that, just going, I really want that. so anyway, but the other thing that's on my short list is the Rd8 Mark II, which is the Behringer version of the 808 that's coming out. They're adding the new analog chip back in. The broken chip that made the 808, they reverse engineered it, and so I'm very curious to see how much it is. And it's not a very big, costly move. So that's probably what I'll end up buying next as I build out the studio. Next question.
Heads up, fans of the Office Hours cooking world. Shannon Cooper's got our next question from San Francisco. I have Comcast internet and I'm looking for a new modem. Any recommendations?
Go ahead, Jason.
All right, Shannon, I'm going to assume that you actually just mean the modem, meaning the gateway itself, and you have your own router. If that is the case, then I like the Netgear CM1000. And as far as the all-in-ones, they make my skin crawl. So yeah, anything that stocks is 3.1 compatible and on Comcast's list will be fine though.
Yeah, and the one that I use with Comcast is the Aris Surfboard, and I think it's a Surfboard 8200 is the one that I'm using. Yeah, and that one has worked really well with Comcast. I would say about twice a year I need to restart it. Like Comcast runs something in the internal whatever, and it doesn't update it because it's not their modem, and so you just have to restart it, and it'll come up and negotiate and figure it out. So, but outside of that, the 8200 has been really successful for me. And then you said again the Netgear. Can you repeat that again, Jason?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I did that quickly. The Netgear CM1000, and I'll put a link in Mukana.
Great. Next question.
Roberto Barrow in Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania is up next. He says, I'm looking to buy a keyboard for my wife, who's a novice player. Does the panel have any suggestions for a quality unit at about half an Alex or less?
All right, go ahead, Jeffrey.
If you're looking for a straight up keyboard, Yamaha does some great stuff. M Audio is also a good keyboard if you're hooking up into a computer to use, because they have the KeyStation 88, which is really nice. Hook it up to the computer, use third-party software. They'll give you third-party software where you can use with that. And of course, if you're on a Mac, you can always use GarageBand pianos for that. The one thing that you want to look for is weighted keys. You don't want cheesy plastic keys because it's gonna sound and feel off. And then there's one other company called The One, I believe, and their claim to fame is they actually have lighted options, so you can actually learn how to plug in your iPad or phone, and then it'll actually light up the keys so you can play along with it to learn a little bit better.
Yeah, and I didn't spend a lot of money on a control surface. So the big thing is whether the keyboard is going to play the music itself or whether you're going to play it into a computer. And I really recommend, if you can, getting a control surface. You get, if you have a computer available, because you can do a lot more for a lot less than half an Alex. What I got for my controller that I have sitting over here right now underneath, because my synthesizers took over, but is a really inexpensive Nectar GX61. Doesn't have weighted keys, not the greatest thing in the world, but it does work, and it ties in well. It's a USB connection, and I can fire it in. And so again, as someone who is a novice player who wants to just see how far they're going to go, I think it's okay. My daughter has learned it on, I don't know what she's using. She's using like a Casio or something, and she has learned how to play really, really well, good keyboard on like $150 Casio that we bought her when she was like, we bought the kids when they were like 6, and she just sits there and watches YouTube and learns how to play. Like it's just because she plays bass, that's what she gets trained to do, and then she plays the keyboard just for fun and guitar just for fun. So I think it gets down to that's that adage. I had a great artist that told me, if someone complains about their pencil, they're not a good artist. And in the same sense that I think that definitely as you get better, you're going to want better keyboards and weighted keys and things that are more powerful. As you get started, I think that I would probably not spend too heavily into it until you figure out if you're going to keep doing it. Next question.
We should go back and note that half an Alex is $300. So what we're
350.
350. I'm sorry, you're right. Yeah, it's been so long since we've put up the list of.
Yeah, we need the list of the
office
different
hours
prices.
Currency.
Yeah, at least it's not half a Mickey. Half a Mickey, you can get a great keyboard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. Or half a Charles, you can get like something that you can show off. All right.
Good with that. Jen's in Sandpoint, Idaho is up next, and Jen said, "What do people use for chairs on productions?"
Here we go.
What is it, the venue or bring your own?
Go ahead, Andrew.
I wasn't going to answer this, but it's actually a much more important question than people realize. Oh my God, when you bring chairs, comfortable chairs on a long production, it makes a huge difference. I'm going to say that next to noisy comms, uncomfortable chairs are probably, that other thing that's going to really tire out a crew, and they don't even realize it, that's the cause of it. So yeah, bring chairs if possible. Not enough of the productions I work on bring them. Generally, if they do bring them, they're like extra office chairs that have been recycled, like they've gotten new office chairs and they've turned these other ones over to production, and if there's enough room on the truck, yes, bring chairs.
Yeah, just get a bigger truck. That's the answer.
That's always the answer. Yeah.
So, go ahead, George.
If you have friends at a production company, you normally could have them bring one of their comfy chairs on the truck. After setup, generally the crew will go scour the hotel or the venue to see where those comfy chairs are hidden, and you could borrow one for the week and bring it back when you were done.
Oh, be careful of that. It's a great way for a venue. Yeah, be careful. Venue. The thing is that here's the thing: is I work with a lot of venues. They don't say anything. They just don't help you later when you ask for it. That's the hard part. Is that the problem with production in general is that everybody's passive aggressive. So you just have to know that like where they get you is not where you did it. so be careful, Bill.
You might think this is a silly little question. It is not. One of the first things I did when we were growing out of being a very small company into a medium-sized one was my brother-in-law gave me a set of really nice folding camping chairs that had our company logo stenciled on the back of the top piece of fabric. And so we started taking those to shoots. People really appreciated it. They really liked it. They mentioned it. Clients mentioned it. It was part of our look. And the next thing you know, then I started working with bigger executives. And so we went to a company in Los Angeles called Hollywood Chairs and ordered a couple of really sweet director's chairs. These are the serious ones that they do fold up, but they are not lightweight and anybody can sit on them. They're super comfortable. And CEOs in those chairs just totally appreciated having a place that was theirs to set. Mm-hmm. And if we had gotten bigger and bigger, I would have ordered more and more of those. These little things are a huge deal when you're dealing with people who are paying you a lot of money to try to make them as comfortable as possible.
Okay, George.
Well, Alex is right. And if you have friends at that venue, I should say, and it's a local venue, and you have friends there in the chair department, then yes. Yeah. But don't just go take it from the bar in the hotel because they will come find you.
the big thing is that, and it's hard. The only reason I brought that up was that in production, when I've loaded in, I have to constantly pull back, especially new crew. My crew won't do it, like my regular crew won't do it, but I pull back new crew of asking for things. We always say that when a production's going on and when everything goes well, the bus goes forward. If something goes wrong, somebody's going under the bus, and there's a whole bunch of things that you can do to get you nearer to the front. Like, there's always going to be somebody show up late, borrow things from people, don't look organized, don't dress well, there's all these things, and all of those things are not any one of them gets you to the front of the bus. But as an aggregate, somebody's going to end up at the front of the bus if things go wrong. And so you want to stay as far away from that as possible. Borrowing anything, like I won't even borrow tape from other people. I'll lend tape and I'll never say anything about it. It's totally fine for people to borrow from me because I want to be a good neighbor, but I never ask for anything, and if I find people in my crew asking for things there, we have words like, don't do that. And anyway, it's everybody's friendly and no one's your friend. You just have to remember that in general production until you know them. As far as chairs go, it's not just comfort. It is effectiveness. Like people being comfortable sitting for 12 hours, it affects your show. Like we've brought 30 chairs with us. Like it's this long train of chairs that comes out of our truck, and they're all stacked 2 at a time, and they're all rolling, and we kind of pull them together. You feel like you're like herding sheep through the back dock to get them all to where we want to go. But we do it because people are more effective. They're in a better mood. They are more focused. It's not a minor thing, and what the venue gives you often is just unacceptable. Next question.
JB in Wisconsin says, Kenneth Jones seemed to have successfully removed the branding from his Shure MV7 microphone. What's his secret? Gaff tape? Some sort of solvent? What did you do, Kenneth?
Well, it's really simple. It's called Scotch 33. I think.
There you go.
All it takes.
Yeah. There you go. Gaff.
I'll take that off when I get the compensation check in the mail, but so far that hasn't cleared yet.
Exactly.
It's electrician's tape. That's not even gaffer's tape.
I know. It's great. It looks nice. Next question.
Goran in Slovenia says, does anyone use DJI's RS2 as a pan tilt zoom head? How would you compare smoothness of the RS2 to a BirdDog P200 or other pan tilt zoom camera in this price range?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, it's going to depend on how you mount it. There's actually another piece of the puzzle that you really need, and it's called the APC-R by Middle Things. And if you have the right lens and you're far enough back, there's all kinds of things that you can do. You got pan, tilt, roll, zoom motors that you can put in. You can then operate it with a Stream Deck. And then the results that they show in this video are pretty phenomenal with that large sensor. So I would say that it's not just about the smoothness, it's about the image quality that you can get. So take a look at that. And that's pretty fantastic. I have the BirdDog right over my shoulder here. It's definitely smooth, but image quality is not going to be on par. I mean, it's a HD. The P200 is HD. You'd have to get into the P4K, and that one will be a bigger unit that'll have bigger motors that'll make the move smoother. So it just kind of depends on the look that you want and the smoothness that you're looking for.
Go, Jason.
I have the RS2 and agree with everything that Guy said, largely because I haven't used any of the BirdDog line. Of course, all gimbals can control pan, tilt, and if you have a way to do it through the lens, zoom, which depends on your camera. Long story short, all gimbals can be used in this way, but not all. The optimization isn't always quite there. That Middle Things is about $700, and just be really careful here because it's not exactly the same thing.
Next question.
Jason Robert Shaw in Sarasota, Florida, up next with picked up an Oculus Quest 2 during Black Friday. Anyone else interested in VR, starting to explore live events in VR? Is there a channel on the Office Hours Discord for VR? And if so, maybe you missed it.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I have the Oculus Quest 2. I've had it for about a year. The one thing I would highly recommend is getting its own dedicated computer VR capable with a 16-foot USB optical cable, because you can do things on the computer that you can't do from the headset itself. Like, for instance, Google Earth, you can't load that from the headset. You have to load that from the computer. There is a VR in Discord, but I don't remember the name. I think it's #VR, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, we should definitely put one in. I'm happy to. I've done a lot of VR work, so I'm happy to throw that in there. I think that we were just waiting for it to come back on again. So for us to start paying attention to it again. I think that the Quest is really good. Now I don't tether the one that I own. Of course, I've only used it for maybe 15 minutes since I got it. I have an HTC, and I have the original Vive, and I have a couple Oculuses, and everything else that I've used in the past. What I love about the Quest is actually that it doesn't tether, and I don't have to deal with a PC that's constantly updating and breaking it. So that was the reason I stopped. One of the reasons I stopped using the Oculus. I don't use it very much because it damages my glasses, and it doesn't have a little adjuster on the top like the Samsung, and so I just I have to put contacts in to use it, and I just won't. So anyway, so my kids use it all the time though. They probably use it 20-30 minutes a day. As far as playing, my daughter was playing. What was she playing? The one with the lightsabers. Last night. So anyway, it's a lot of fun. I will say from the stuff we've done so far, until the resolution comes up, watching long events in Oculus is painful. It's just really not built for that. And I think that right now, with the resolution that we have, and with a lot of the other things, that we're better off with short experiences that are great, rather than watching whole things. Oftentimes where they put those cameras is not in a place that is great. The camera's only good, in my opinion, if you're doing video from 5 feet to 15 feet. And after that, it's not that great. Too close, you start seeing tearing. Too far away, there's no parallax. There's no nothing. There's not enough resolution. So anyway, but that's about to get a lot better. Next question.
Comes from George Butters in Halifax, and he, I guess, had a major power loss up there overnight in Nova Scotia, and says, what do you suggest to be able to keep working long enough to do a safe shutdown, and how do you keep going if that happens during a live stream?
Go ahead, George.
So I would suggest having a separate backup system on your routers or your main internet backup, and a separate backup on your computers also. Just a few components that could keep the stream going. It's difficult to answer the second part, what happens during the live stream. It's so many variables there, because if you drop power, more than likely it's going to keep on going, and it depends on how long that power is going to be down for. Again, there's some solutions on the market right now. A lot of us are working from home, so the next step I see in the future is to actually having a generator tie into the home, or for office, having some kind of backup, a larger backup system. But it's kind of difficult to answer that question right now. It depends on, are you working from home or office space? But definitely having different components of backup segmented out is probably a good idea.
Yeah, I live in California, so this happens to us all the time. So we've gotten pretty good at it. I have enough UPS to run everything for 15 minutes. It's just an APS 1500, and it's about $150, and I've got 3 of them in my office. One handles all the lights, one handles all the gear, and that'll keep both of them running for about 10 or 15 minutes. The other one is just on the modems, and that'll last 6 hours. So the whole house will remain with connectivity for 6 hours without any power. And then right now I'm looking at a variety of different solutions. I haven't personally got a generator. When we do big events, we use generators at the office. Same thing. UPSs that'll last 10 minutes so that we can throw over if we need to. So that's what we've done on very large events, is to make sure that we have a way to pop that over. Yeah, that's kind of how we approach that. Next question.
Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York is up. He says, does the DVE store have a package set up for an educator or a counselor or therapist who has everything they need to get to look the best for everyday teaching or sessions?
Go ahead, Guy.
No.
Wow.
There's a list of different things on this page for office hours, but there's not a direct kit. Fenwick has been trying to get me to build something like that, and now hearing it twice, I should really put that on my list of things to do. But there is a list, and I'll put it in Mukana so you guys can take a look.
We should maybe do a brainstorming for teachers, like maybe obviously on Saturday. Someone should put that question in, and we should just talk about it. But like building the ultimate teacher station would be kind of cool. Again, this is another one where it could be a couple different levels, of stations that are really designed not as a studio, but really a single camera, able to have a whiteboard, able to look at things, like we have to define what those are. Yeah. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he asks, after completing a universe project, can you run the project in the background as a Windows service without logging into the system?
You might have stumped us. I don't know if we have anyone that's a universe expert yet. I think we got stumped on that one. Sorry, Douglas. All right, next question.
Jens in Sandpoint, Idaho is back with, does anyone have any recommendations for dealing with small fires or smoke? Wow.
Go ahead, George. He's not here anymore, but we had this issue recently. Go ahead, George.
Right beside me here, there's a specific fire extinguisher to handle electrical fire, because most of my office is electrical, like most of you. So you have to really, that's what I use right now, is making sure I have a specific extinguishers on both floors for a particular fire.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I resisted the urge to say put them out. No, put them out with a very specific kind of probably highly carcinogenic fire extinguisher that is completely safe for electronics. That's generally the right way to do it, and don't ever use them again.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is that to figure out what kind of fire, like it's really important to know what kind of fire and what you're going to apply to it. So, there's things that can get much worse if you put the wrong things on them. so you want to, and to get them away from fuel. We had one where we suddenly got square waves from a generator into our UPSs, and smoke started billowing out of them. And it was funny over comms. You just heard, we're in the middle of the desert in Utah. There's nothing, and you just hear this, psh, Marty, we've got smoke in the truck, and so Marty comes running over, and there's just all this smoke, and we unhooked it and got it hooked back up, and some of them still worked. Fortunately, we had primaries and backups, because the primaries they weren't working anymore. Go ahead, Bill.
Extra caution if you're doing any kind of cooking show, because obviously grease fires are one of the most dangerous things. And if you toss water on those, you're in deep trouble. So pay attention to the kind of content you're doing, and do not put deep fat fryers in your office.
Yeah. I for our cooking shows, I so want the hapless chef that is part of it, that we never go full screen to. And you just constantly see them like catching things on fire, and you just see them running back and forth. And the whole show is just like this little comic like corner that you cut to that's just somebody not doing it right.
The Swedish accident-prone chef. Hurdy. Oh, boy.
Yeah. Next question.
The Seventh Scroll in Brooklyn, the couple there, says, morning, guys. Thoughts about the Arducam autofocus camera, potentially for office hours 2.0. And it looks like there's a Kickstarter link there, so it must be something on the way.
Yeah, I know. I'm all for a new autofocus. Oh, this is like a tiny little camera. That looks exciting. Yeah, I mean, the biggest issue that I have is always sensor size. So it's less about autofocus, and it's more about, what kind of depth of field am I going to get, those types of things. Although some of that gets handled when you have little overhead cameras or close-up cameras. Little cameras can go, a long way. So, yeah. Next question.
Well, we've reached the end of our regular questions, and we're moving into the audio specific since it's after the top of the hour. So Stephen Lindholm will start us off there from Aalborg, Finland, and asks, thanks to office hours, I'm now looking at a Mixpre from my wife. She's
That's the perfect thing. I could have got her jewelry, but instead I got her Mixpre.
The Mixpre 3.2.
Sound devices are forever.
Are you getting it for her, or are you getting it for you? All right. Anyway, go ahead.
He notes it seems to be hard to find. Is there better just going with a Mixpre 6.2 if you can't get a 3?
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to have a really hard time. I don't think that they're making the Mixpre 3s 2s right now, and that has to do with the chip shortage. So the chip shortage, there's better demand for the 6s and 10s, and so the business model works better for them. So it's just not with the chip shortage, the Mixpre 3 2s. And here's the thing: if you can afford the Mixpre 6, it's a lot more mixer. You can do a lot more with it than the Mixpre 3. So you're going to be really well off. You're not going to be sorry that you got it. I think it's a good purchase if you can do it. But yeah, you only find Mixpre 3s on eBay for more than the original price. But make sure to get the 2, not the 1, because you want to add. You're going to want to add noise assist. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says in Brant Kruger's article, and he's got a link there to the article, he says limitations breed creativity. Could groove boxes like the Roland MC707 with an 8-track sequencer be useful for musical inspiration?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. The boxes are anything that with anything saying you're only going to do something with this is the tool set I have and I can't just keep adding to that tool set does force you to be more creative and figure things out. So it could be. Yep. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next, and he says in an article about performance tips for K through 12, so elementary school in the U.S. ensembles, one positive comment was about the competence of and consistency of Disney's audio engineers. I've only mixed singers-songwriters in Belfast, but how does one develop that consistency?
I'm waiting for Andy to put his hand up, but he's not putting his hand up. So yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I don't know, but there's something to be said for taking the same project and mixing it a lot of different ways, and just practicing with that. Look, a lot of audio is really just making mistakes or trying things out and then coming back and looking at it. It's, and I think what Douglas is really asking here is like, how do I sketch this thing too? Like just do a lot of sketches and play with it and play with too much reverb and then not enough and things like that, and then, get some feedback on it and see how it works.
Yeah. And by the way, for those listening, this is going to be a really short hour. You can do general questions. We don't have enough audio questions to go through a whole hour. So if you want to if you have other questions, burning questions that you want to ask, go ahead and ask them, or it'll be really short. We'll go to after hours. What I will say is exactly what Andy was talking about is I have a tendency to push things really too far and then pull them back all the time because then I can hear what it's doing. So when I pull it back, it's like tasting an ingredient and then being able to taste it in the food. Like if you don't taste the ingredient itself, you won't know what that taste is in the food. And so if you turn it way up, you get to hear what that reverb does or what this does or what this EQ does. I'll just turn the thing like all the way up just to see where is it grabbing onto something, and then I'll pull it back. Generally, if you're doing more than subtle, you're probably making a mistake, and there's something wrong, like generally, if I have to turn anything more than 60% on anything that I use, what goes through my head is there's something is wrong. Now, maybe I need to correct for something wrong in the capture or whatever, but video, audio, anything, if anything's more than 60%, I go, there's something wrong with the system. And I start DXing all the way through the process. The one thing I will say about Disney is that there's so much work. I mean, Roscoe can talk to this at times, but I've done jobs at Disneyland, and something that feels simple that you just walked into and happened, you have no idea how much setup. Like we did one for some celebration, and it was, we got there the day before and we got all set up the evening before, and then we got there first thing in the morning, and then we were there for 6 hours, and this was like a 20-minute hit that was just like for someone who walked by. There were 100 people involved. There were, and I was managing the live stream, but there were like 100 people involved in lights, and they drew all the stuff in. But if you were a person at Disneyland walking by, it's just one of the things that happened that day. Like it's not, it wasn't anything particularly dramatic. And that's the thing you have to get and that's with everything. I mean, when you see behind the scenes here, like when I was thinking about it when George was showing his setup, I was like, people don't realize, they look at our little windows here, they don't realize there's this like array in front of us with all this stuff and everything else, and that's how this works. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I was going to say K through 12 stuck with me because I remember when my son Mike was in those elementary things and flirting with the band and playing in it. First of all, my heart goes out to all you elementary educators doing music work because it is the most thankless and wonderful thing, particularly when you have no control over how loud dynamics of players and things. They're barely able to make a sound out of this. And a large number of times those sounds are not in tune and in key, and they're still shepherding these young players into the success that will lead them through a career of appreciating and being able to make music. And I just think they are undersung heroes out there working in all of our elementary schools who are doing this great work.
And I also think that practice is just doing lots of it makes a big difference. And then, but practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. And just remember that constantly paying attention and being unsatisfied with your work is the thing that like we did all kinds of crazy things with like VHS tapes when I was in high school, because we didn't know you weren't supposed to be able to do that. Like, and we would just keep on working through it because we were unsatisfied. We wanted to be bigger and better and everything else. So you also want to push your whole team to do that when possible. It's much more fun that way anyway. Go ahead, Ken.
One thing I noticed in a recent tweet of yours, Alex, was that you were talking about a production in Africa, and you mentioned 10 years it took from the time you began until this production took place.
Well,
so
this
doesn't happen overnight. That's the point.
Yeah, and the thing that we were excited about with that specific in Rwanda. So we built a school with the Rwanda government called the Africa Digital Media Academy, ADMA, 10 years ago. It started with a little school and a couple of us down there showing people how to do stuff. What I posted on Twitter was, I believe it's fourth and fifth generation of those students. So it's like the students of the students of the students of the students. Like it's not that we, because we were doing productions like that in 2013, 2014. It took that long to kind of build that capacity. But now you have folks that are just doing live stuff all the time at the convention center for heads of state, and they're not. Most of them don't even know who I am. They wouldn't know. Like it's so. It's so evolved and it's been, for a variety of reasons. I haven't been down there just because of now COVID, but before that, just tons of work and everything else. And I wasn't able to get there. So it's been years since I've been down there. And the fact that Ryan and Chris have kept it going and let the students keep teaching each other and keep on building it. But to your point, it took years and we're exacting. We're constantly pushing everybody to be better at what they do. Jason?
I was reminded of yes, I too have done a quick event at Disney, and yeah, the amount of forethought is staggering. And it's one of those, yep, everyone looks nice, and here I am at tearing my studio apart because it doesn't have enough stuff.
Exactly.
That's the equivalent.
Yeah. Next question.
Next one comes from Glenn Mead. And Glenn, I'm sorry, my mouse is in the wrong place and went away for a second. There we go. Glenn Mead from Waterloo, Ontario, Canada says, I have an 11 by 13 room with hard surfaces, no carpet. Should I be adding sound deadening panels? If so, does the shape of the panels matter? Square, rectangular, triangular, or octagonal?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'd say it comes down to the budget. I just picked up the London Room 10, which is these panels behind me, and here's what one of them looks like. It's more about the parallel walls and how those are bouncing back around and at what frequency. So if you go to a place like RLX's website, you can get an idea of the different shapes and applications that they have. They have all kinds of different wedges and bass traps. And then there's other things to look at, like things that scatter the sound. So the room that I have is this one here, the London 10 by Prime Acoustic. But then if you look at like their radiator line, you could see where sound goes in and then it gets confused and then it shoots out in a different direction. So you're talking about two different things. One's scattering the sound, so it is no longer parallel bouncing back and forth and back and forth. And the other thing is actually soaking it up. So you can get pretty crazy pretty quick. So there is a room designer software that you can go in Prime Acoustic and you can put your room information in there, and then you can choose your panels and you can get a quote and kind of see where you're at. So I'd take a look at primeacoustic.com.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, the shape of the panels, the only one that really matters is a bass trap, because those are designed to go into corners, and also a lot of times you'll see them in the corner where the ceiling meets the wall, that sort of thing. And then there's sort of this general rule of thumb is to treat 50% of the surfaces in the room. There is a thing where you can suck too much life out of the room. I mean, if it's a voiceover booth, yeah, it can be dead. Dead as possible. But if you're doing any other sort of recording in there, if it's too dead, it can just seem like the person's speaking in a vacuum.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, that's this is one where Mickey and Jason, everybody's it depends thing is such an important part, because you're going to be in a room. That room is going to have a shape. It's going to have surfaces. It might have hardwood. It might have carpet. It might have a door that's recessed somewhere or not. It might be just a box, and it might be exactly a box the wrong size. Most rooms in houses, particularly not gigantic houses, are kind of like 10 by 12 or 10 by 10, and you get these even things that are bad for reflections building up. So all of these things that, like Guy is showing you, there's a panoply of solutions, because each room has individual little problems. The way to professionally do it, and I'm not suggesting this for everybody because it is really a hassle, but you go in and you test by doing sweeps of frequencies, and you decide what gets enhanced and what gets diminished in that room and how it reflects sound based on where your speakers are and where your listener is or your microphones are. There's a huge science to this, but at heart, everybody can do something. If you listen to your room and you have problems, you say, this just sounds too echoey or too reverby or just harsh, there's going to be something you can do to help that. And it's going to probably involve purchasing a product and mounting it somewhere to interrupt these audio standing waves and things that are just part of physics and happen for all of us. You really keep coming back, keep going to office hours or after hours, listen to people talking about audio, and then ask for advice, because it's the one thing about audio is you can't see it. So people kind of ignore it, and you can't ignore it, because clarity of getting your message across is 90% the sound and 90% the articulation of being able to hear what's being said.
Yeah. And I will say, if I'm going to err on one side, I'll suck out all the life out of it before I'll leave echo in a room. Like, that's kind of like if I'm going to go one direction, I'm going to go I'm going to go full on. I don't want to hear echo. Because what it does is it also means that if you have reverb in the room, it really affects how far away you can be from the mic. So as you pull away from the mic, you have to turn it up, and then you start picking up more and more of the room. So you can get away with a lot if you can knock that down. The first things that I actually go after are above and below. So I do carpet. I will put a carpet, I'll get, remnants, I'll do whatever I have to, but I'll cover that as much of that floor as I can with something. And then if I have a hanging ceiling, I'll put the 2x2s in that are actual foam acoustics that will suck up stuff from the above. And then I just cover 2 walls and then that's going to cut down most of it. Now, sometimes I'm known to cover all the walls, anything that you're not seeing on air. And sometimes if you are seeing it, I'll just cover everything that isn't a screen, with sonics, usually for me. And then I add bass traps back in to make up for the fact that I just took out all the mid-range and all the high range and none of the bass. And then I'll go back and try to pull that back out again. So that's kind of how I approach it. And it's not scientific. It's just that's how I've done it for the last 20 years. Next question.
TJ Asher in Minneapolis is up next. He says, I saw a video that was a live arena show that had something like 1,000 musicians and singers, and all looked to be on microphone or plugged into sound. How does one manage 1,000+ mics and inputs?
Go ahead, Andrew.
So I didn't see what he was talking about, but perhaps there are multiple engineers for one thing. And then if there is sort of a master engineer who's taking those stems, as it were, and premixes, a lot of times they're mixing not off the inputs, but off of DCAs, or VCAs is the old analog term, voltage controlled amplifiers. And everything's grouped in very logical ways. So, if you've got a chorus of people over here, that'll be one fader. That's a DCA. And then, like maybe you'll have all the drums on another one. You'll have the full band on another one. There's sort of these logical ways to do that. But with that many musicians, I'd be willing to bet that they had multiple engineers
and multiple mixers, maybe, right?
Oh yeah.
Because if you're only going to have 56 lines because you have a Digico, right? Remember that? Anyway, so next question. Yeah. So then suddenly you realize, oh, there's 2. Anyway, next question.
Stefan Fischer at Worksburg, Germany is up next. He says, what in the audio chain would you set when? All right, let me restart here. Where in the audio chain would you insert a high pass filter, in the mic or in the Atem?
Go ahead, Andrew.
I can't speak to the Atem, but traditionally in analog signal flow, the high pass filter is part of the preamp section. It's even before the EQ. So that's a good place for it. It also, if you have a choice to put it in there, it makes the things that come after it work less hard because you've rolled off that low end, and compressors react better, and so forth and so on. So I would say if you have a choice, turn it on and put it there.
Next question.
Brian Schwartz in Baltimore, Maryland, up next with, where do you hype the mic A command in Mukana? Type the mic A command in Mukana or Discord.
You should put it in the chat in Mukana. You should be able to do mic A. It's forward. I think it's / mic A, and you should get a list of all the links that were posted there. Next question.
The Seventh Scroll out of Brooklyn, New York, again is back with, can we get a lab in after hours on how to build a teleprompter using MakerPipe in the near future, please?
Yeah, so I'm going to post an idea related to that. We're going to talk about that on Monday. Both the two things that I have on my list to show on Monday is an idea for the desk, an idea for the teleprompter. I'm not going to show how to do it because I don't know how to do it yet. But we're going to play with that process there soon. So what I'm probably going to do is then buy some cheap glass at the size that I think I'm going to build it at, and with silvered glass, but not expensive. And then we'll figure it all out, and then I'll put real teleprompter glass in, which will be $700. So anyway, but we'll talk more about that. We got to figure out a bunch of things. I'm going to start building shelves and other things with EMT so that we can start to figure out, iteratively what we're going to do. Next question.
Dennis Champion Walker, often on the panel here. It's from Southend-on-Sea in Great Britain. Says, I've started the Mix Effect Pro trial, but I'm currently struggling to get Companion to trigger SuperSource presets. Which action do I use in Companion?
Go, George.
So in Companion, the connections, first of all, you have to be, it's only in the beta, so you probably need to be using Companion 2.0. And you can only access the Mix Effects, the new module in the beta version. So you definitely need to make sure that your IP addresses are matching. The device that you're going to launch it on, whether it's an iPhone, iPad, it needs to you need to have that IP in the connections module. You have to make sure also the target port is set. The same port needs to be set on your device and in Companion. And on your buttons, you need to make sure that your buttons in Companion matches what you have on the device to be able to make that connection happen. It's a little bit hard to explain here, but if you are still having a problem with it, just drop Atem a note on Discord, and he's pretty good about answering questions.
Next question.
Jens in Sandpoint, Idaho is up next. He says, how would you mic someone in a wood shop to do a cooking show, but with power tools? That sounds interesting.
Go ahead, Andrew.
So if I'm understanding right, it's a cooking show, but they're going to use power tools to make the food. Maybe.
I bet you a drill with the right fitting would be a great blender. I mean, you just got to think about it. In fact, a little bit more RPM.
Headset mics for one thing, and I would, if it's really loud, maybe directional headset mics rather than omnis on those heads.
Go, Jason.
This is my favorite goofy question in recent history. I love this. I would say a head-worn mic, on a body pack, and if you could afford it, a dedicated boom operator.
Good, Bill.
This is the one time I might suggest wireless rather than wired, just because I hate having cords around when somebody's operating power tools, unless you can get around it. Maybe hire a cord wrangler just to watch that, because safety first.
Yeah, and what we did find with the cooking on Sunday with Ken was that what we found is the headsets worked really, really well with the blenders or with the food processor. So I imagine it would translate to the machinery. Is that because the headset's so close to you and the level is so much lower, that it falls off to the point that Andy made. It really falls off, and it doesn't become overpowering to have the drills and everything else working. You just hear them in the background, which I think adds something to the show as well. Next question.
Danny Law in Malaysia is up next. How far would you need to place wireless mic directional antennas away from an LED video wall panel in order to prevent RF interference?
Go ahead, Andy.
There's no hard fast rule, I think, but they can't be behind the wall because they can't shoot through the wall. And Some of the companies I've worked for carry helical antennas, which are highly directional, which means you can get them out in front of the wall and point them where you need them. Those are the things to think about. If you have shark fin antennas, which are, pretty standard in this industry, you just have to get them, out ideally in front of the wall or to the side of it, shooting in. If you have to put them in front of house, you can, that's another way to do it. That's where the helical scan antennas come in really handy. I just did a show where the two antennas were at front of house because there was a video wall backstage.
Yeah. We found to be 15, 20 feet. And I don't have a scientific thing, but 15 to 20 feet is about what we found that we stopped having the trouble that we were having with those wireless when we moved them that far away from the wall. Next question.
Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri wants to talk about the difference between augmented reality and virtual reality. And he says, in my opinion, AR could be analogous with a navigation system and VR with a movie theater. Both have unique use cases. Why the VR versus AR debate?
Oh, I think we'll do both. I just think we're going to use AR a lot more. As someone who's done a lot of both, being able to add it to everything that you're doing. One of the things that's really just being able to say, oh, I just want to see something in front of me. If you go up into Discord now and look at the proposal for my set that I'm working on, you can take that with your phone and just put it out in front of you. You can set it on your desk. You can move it around. You don't have to put anything on or anything else to do that. And so I think that that's going to be really interesting. And there's so much you can do to add to what you're doing in life. You can have heads up displays of this is how to turn the knobs. This is how to do. You're going to see this happen over time, which is you're going to walk up and there's going to be little, heads up displays, HUDs, that are popping up. If you have an AR glasses on or whatever, that it'll just tell you what you're looking at and you can turn it and it'll tell you why you're doing that and all these other things that are all there, as well as directions, as well as entirely new experiences within the space that you're doing. You're not in an isolated area. I think VR is great for isolating you, so that you can learn something or go somewhere, be in a space. And I think that as the resolution increases, the real challenge for VR is resolution. It's not really viable until it gets to 6K, and I'll argue that it's only partially viable until it gets to 8K per eye. Once you get to that level, you start to see real detail and it starts to become really interesting. But the current stuff out there is okay. Go ahead, Bill.
Based on early conversations with my friend Phil Hodgetts, AR and VR to me are both expressions and different kind of pathways of an underlying core thing called machine learning, which is not the same as either of those. And it's not the only thing that makes AR, and VR. But the idea of machine learning being able to program things to make, it's not decisions, but to make choices based on rule sets and things like that is really, to me, the most fascinating part of this. It reaches into both AR and VR. And I think it's one of the things that's really changing the planet underneath us quietly.
That's a fascinating approach. I've worked on AR and VR for 20 years. It's the first time I've ever heard anyone talk about machine learning related to AR and VR. So it's an interesting, it's an interesting thought. All right, next question.
Okay. Seven Scroll in Brooklyn says, would it hurt an audio chain workflow to connect a mix pre for the noise assist to the final output of an X32 mix?
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm going to answer the question as asked. By definition, anytime you're doing noise assist, it is a destructive effect. So you use it as sparingly as possible. I would use it as an insert effects loop and put it along a mix bus. The X32 has plenty. And that way you're only actually putting noise assist on the channels that need it.
All right, go ahead, George.
When I rewire mine here in the next couple of weeks, I'm gonna output my mix pre into the X32. But like Jason said, I'm gonna use it sparingly, probably only for any kind of web things I'm doing. I'm not gonna use it as the final output, but just to pick up as a web, to go to different places on the web to have that effect, not as the main output.
Yeah, we used to use cedar boxes all the time for this, and we would actually take our whole mix and just run it through a cedar and push it out when we had discussions, and it worked pretty well. It was, for smaller stuff, but back to what Jason was talking about, when we had larger events, we used a DNS8 cedar that would be inserts into that would be processed and then passed back. So it just depends on how big the show is. Next question.
Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota, up next with, now that we're migrating away from VPN hookups, is there really a need for an X-Touch on the remote control end?
I think we want to get to that point. I mean, I think that, where some people can actually use the hardware to tie it in. I don't think that the answer is necessarily VPN, but we may be able to use the X-Touch and figure out a way using Streamweaver or other things to pass that data to the system. So there's no reason why we couldn't be grabbing onto those inputs from the X-Touch and delivering them. The big thing we're trying to get away from is the idea, and it could even, like, the X-Touch could control Universe, which then controls whatever, so that, it could be going through all of those things. The bigger thing we're trying to get away from is someone having to do a whole bunch of setup related to VPNs, which are a security nightmare. It's just not what you want to be doing as it scales. It's something we've all done for a decade, or I've done for a decade, but it doesn't scale. No, next question.
Ken Jordan in Surrey in the UK says, after the failure of my Rode Wireless Go 2 on Sunday, can you recommend a buy once, cry once wireless microphone solution for a cooking show?
Good guy.
Yeah, the kind of normal person price, the one Alex range, that would be the Sennheiser G4. So $700 range is kind of the industry standard. Those things are everywhere, and they have over 1,600 channels. I think it's 1,680 channels. And again, as I said earlier, perform an auto scan at a venue, and that way you can kind of look around. And they come in A, B, G, and you can go on Sennheiser's site and you can look at the area that you're predominantly going to be in, and you can see the zones of what's best for you. You can actually type in Google Sennheiser Frequency Finder, and you could find your place and pick the one that's best for you. I'm sorry to hear that your wireless Go failed, though. I mean, we've been selling a ton of those things, and I was always a little weary of them. But at the highest end, if failure is not an option, then we like Lectro. There's also some great stuff from Shure with the Accent line. I tested some of that. That's solid. That's what you're going to find. The best musical performers in the world are going to have that Accent stuff. So it just depends on the budget. But Lectro, Shure, Wizzycom, those are some of the higher end ones to take a look at. And Sound Devices has their own with the
A20.
A21.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, Guy pretty much covered it. I was going to recommend Lectrosonics if you really want to. If the budget isn't a problem, then that's going to. There are units that are still in use 20, 30 years after, as long as the frequency distribution issues didn't snap you. There was a point where they took some of the blocks that were used in wireless radio mics and they allocated it to the digital TV spectrum. So there are old things in the used market, and be careful of those because they may not be legal to use in the USA with the new FCC thing. So just pay attention to the frequency blocks.
I think if I was going to buy one and I wasn't constrained, I mean, we use Accent when we have shows that absolutely have to do what they need to do. And that's, so the standard for us is to do a bunch of Accent channels to make that work. I think that if I wasn't constrained by cost, I'd probably go into the Sound Devices, the A20 minis with those receivers, just because I just know the support process is really good, and that they look really great, and I can manage them with my phone. All right, next question.
Has anyone played with their new microphones, with the new lavs from Sound Devices?
I haven't played with them yet, no, but we'll see if we can get them in. Next question.
Rob Collins in Kansas City, Missouri says, what's the preferred mic position for a user who gets much louder than normal sporadically?
Headset. Like, give them a headset. It's really hard, like they're talking up. There's number one is a headset, and then if that doesn't work, compressor. Like you put them in it's not a position. If you have a headset, it's going to get them there. If they're talking, if their vocal range is different, then just put them into a compressor and squeeze them in. That's the only way to really handle that. It is something that folks who do a lot of radio, especially people who have side tone, tend to get really good at managing it. Like if you listen to Leo is probably one of the best that I've ever heard do this. He's really good at sounding like he's excited, but not making any more noise. Like he does this thing. If you listen to Mac Break, you'll hear him go talking. He'll go up and he'll do all the things that would sound like you were yelling, but he's not actually getting any louder. And when you sit next to him, you really notice it. Is that and so a radio person gets good at using your inflections up and down, but not using actual volume to do that. Go ahead, Bill.
And if somebody really is experienced, they will know, like, wow, that's amazing. The fact that I rose my voice in amplitude, I also instinctively moved away from the microphone a little bit. So
Right.
it might be that a lavalier for somebody who doesn't have a lot of training is the best thing, because you'll get a consistent electrical level from them, even if they're getting louder or softer, and handle that with a compressor. But if there's somebody who does this a lot, train them to use the mic the way it's designed to be made. And if they're loud, get away from it a little, and if they're close and they want to whisper, get closer to it so that they can use that physical inverse score principle to help them.
Yep. Next question.
TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota says, for voiceover specifically, what would be how dead or silent does the recording environment need to be? How quiet is a typical voice booth? Is it nearing an anechoic chamber yet? Quiet.
Hold on a second. I don't think, yeah, nothing's near an anechoic chamber. Like, if you've ever been in one, like
they're scary.
I really know how much tinnitus I have when I go into an anechoic chamber. And so, cause I can hear the little hum that's always there. I can really hear it there. And so, but I don't think it needs to be either. I mean, I think that, but what I will say is that I make everything as dead as I can. Most people's voiceovers, and Bill will be able to talk about this more, you kind of block out everything. You'd rather add it back in later. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, very much that. And they're not anechoic chambers. They're not trying to eliminate every little thing. The goal for them, in my opinion, is to allow you as a voice talent to be able to work consistently no matter how the environment changes around you. So while your bedroom studio may be perfectly good at midnight, if you have traffic next door, it may be useless at 5:00 p.m. and at 8:00 in the morning when the traffic is going by. So we put these voice booths in to suppress those kinds of things, so that no matter when somebody calls us and says, I need a voiceover, you can go in, shut the door on a prepared space that's going to knock down 99% or even 85%. You can get a good recording if you have a directional mic and good technique, and just let us continue to work. So they're not magical. My gosh, you have to eliminate every possible sound like an anechoic chamber. That's not the goal.
Every time I think about it, when I'm ever working on fixing my studio or building something that we're going to have sound in and everything else, I just remember a behind the scenes of Dirty Jobs where they show Mike Rowe in his hotel room with a blanket over his head and an SM58 doing the voiceover for a broadcast. I was just like, okay, maybe I'm thinking about this too hard. All right, next question.
Well, it's not thinking about it too hard. If you have to do it at 2:00 and it's noisy, then spending money for a voice booth is a good.
No. It totally makes sense. It's just a funny. I was like, you just have to remember, you just have to not have it not be roomy, and people can fix a lot of things later.
I can't tell you how many times I've just gone out to my car because somebody needed that spot fixed right now, and you go out to your car, close the doors, wait for the traffic to suppress, and get your voiceover done.
I did a voiceover for a commercial, and it was funny. It was last minute. It was for a friend, and they just needed it right then. It needed to be high quality. And I built this, like, what felt like a kid's fort in my living room, because it wasn't a living room that I was visiting. So I said, can I borrow some blankets and some tables and some things? And I built this like weird little, like, of all their blankets that they had and all the stuff up there. And then I pulled out a good mic and did the recording, and it was just and it came out great. They were really happy with it. But I did realize you can't. The key is knowing what you're listening to. That gets back to, like, you can turn on the mic and go, oh, I'm still hearing this, and I'm going to block that out. Next question.
Moving on, Douglas Carmichael's up next. When specifying synthesizers for a sound or music design studio, is it best to have a few quality pieces like a Moog One, the OB6, and Peak that do many things well, or multiple pieces that do different specific things?
I'm not the right person to answer because I bought a bunch of inexpensive things that I could play with. I don't know if we have the right people on this show, but what I will say in general is that whoever's going to use the synthesizer is going to know what they want. Like it is I have found so far that synthesizers are a very personal thing. If I was going to make a mistake, I'd make it towards higher end tools. I bought a bunch of stuff because I'm trying to experiment with how do the synthesizers work inside of surround, and how can I play with as many different things as possible as I play with that, knowing that at some point I know that the modular will become something that I'm doing, but I'm trying to hold off because it's really expensive and I need to spend money on a studio first. Go ahead, Jason.
I think it depends largely on why you are kind of going into this form of electronic instrumentation. Sure, Moog 1, any sort of analog configuration is something that you get into because analog is your thing and you want to be able to patch it and you want it to be very specific and you want to be able to say, there, that was mine. I had one of those really high-end things. Until you know what you're really out there for in synthesizers, my advice would be the latter.
With all of these things, I think about like when I started skiing. When you start skiing, it doesn't matter what boards you put on your feet. like it just doesn't matter because you have no idea what you're doing. It doesn't matter if they're scratched. It doesn't matter if they're like, as you're way out, your precision is way lower than your accuracy. Your accuracy is way lower than your precision. So anyway, at some point, you can tell the difference between a Rosinol and a K2, and you can tell whether it's been scratched or how thin it is, or the weights and the way that your boots go in and out of the clips, and all that stuff becomes important, but not until you really know what you're doing. You're not paying attention, and it's not worth wasting money on it until then. There is a buy one cry once, but then there's also a buy once and cry because you don't use it anymore. You spend all that money.
Buy once, cry once for skis, though. Yeah, rent until you're good.
Yeah. Next question.
Jonathan Kearney in Liverpool in the UK says, at the moment, I simply cannot justify the cost of a Mixpre for teaching online, mostly in Zoom. What would you recommend as a USB interface? Currently using a Zoom H1N with a Rode video mic.
I would say a MV7. If you're, I don't think a lot of the interfaces, I think you get a better sound. I mean, I know you already have an interface and you already have a Rode mic, unless you're going to put other things into it. If it's just a mic, you're better off with that mic than to constantly be, working on interfaces, unless you think you're going to put other things into it. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, you're lucky you're in the UK because there happens to be a cache of Behringer Flow 8s at Thomann. So look up the Behringer Flow 8. It's been shown here. It's a really good sounding little interface, and there's lots of control. So, and we had I think we had a second hour on it, didn't we?
I think we did, yeah. And if you're going to put other things into it, I think the Flow 8's a great one. The Revelator is also a good one that seems to be coming out. I'm testing it right now. It seems to be working pretty well. I have a hard time not having noise assist because of my room, so I tend to wash all those other ones out. But the Flow 8 looks really, really good. I mean, everybody that I've seen buy one has been happy, with that as an interface. Next question.
Danny Law in Malaysia is talking sound again. What would be the minimum density per meter square that is needed for an acoustic panel to be effective?
Go ahead, Bill.
Effective at what? And so here's the thing. People see these panels and they think they're maybe soundproofing or their sound deadening or something. Often those panels are there to break up reflections, and the convolutions in the surface are as important as their sound's transmission capabilities. You can do a quick little determination of sound transmission just by taking a square of the stuff and literally putting it over your ear and put it on, take it off. Is there a difference? And you specifically should listen. Is there a difference in the low end, in the high end? What is changing when sound moves through that material specifically? If it's open cell foam, it's going to sound almost transparent. If it's closed cell foam, it may knock down some highs, but that's all it's going to do. And if you're expecting it to soundproof your room so that the neighbor's kid's car stereo boom that's driving you nuts is abated, it's not going to do that. There's nothing but heavy mass and airproofing a recording room that's going to kick down those low-end frequencies. So you really have to know what you're trying to get accomplished when you go in to treat a room. What's the problem? And then how do you fix that problem? You can't just say, buy this stuff and put it up and everything will go away.
Next question.
Moving to Guy Cochran of Seattle, Washington says, what is that Harrison Mixbus VBN? What does it do?
Andy, do you want to give us, do you want to talk a little bit to that?
Just a little, because that's what actually got me interested in reaching out to Harrison directly, where I talked to them. So it's a turnkey system. It's a software-based mixer. It seems to be pre-configured for a few different things, but certainly for virtual events. It has built-in IFB mixes, mix minuses. It'll do ducking, for example. It's all built into this ecosystem that they've created. It is not cheap. That was something I was curious about too. It's really designed for the enterprise, for the company.
How much is it? Do you know?
I don't. I'd only be guessing because I can't remember, but it's really not cheap.
$2,800 per year.
There you go. Which maybe is not. I mean, I guess if you're going to use it all the time, that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
But
I mean, everything's just how quickly you can pay for it. I mean, it was expensive for us to have 2 live views. I had 2 live views with an extender, so my monthly bill was for a long time was $5,500 a month, for those 2 live views in the extender. But I charged my clients $600 a show. And so I just had the math of how many shows I had to do. And I won we used it a lot more than that per month. so they were really busy because I do it per day. So it would, when it was there, so it would be, so it was pretty typical for us to make, $10,000 a month on the live view rentals on a $5,500. And so then it doesn't matter what the number is. Like if you can pay for it, and it doesn't matter if you stop being able to produce. The next year, George.
So I tried to go look up the price again on it. So Guy was right, it's about 2,000, but you can only use it on one setup. If you want additional, I think it's an additional 1,500 or more for another module. So you can't move it around. It's a little bit harder. So you're going to pay per seat.
One of the reasons I wanted to bring them on is also to just see how it would, like I looked at it, I was like, oh, that'd be really fun to use for what we do here, to mix outside of it, because I've been kind of leaning towards Unity for that. And having something that was dedicated, I was like, oh, it'd be really interesting if we could do the contributors. Contributors only being 4 is a little limited. So it would have to be like, can we do 20? And so we're asking for something slightly different than what they have. But I am interested. I think that the reason that I'm interested in having them on is that I think that audio is one of the things that isn't done well in the cloud right now. So I think that I just haven't seen something. One of the big reasons that keeps me from going, oh, I should just do everything we're doing in the cloud, is I like to build very complex audio chains, and I look at the stuff that's up there and I go, like, I don't know if I would, I don't know if I could build what I'm used to building with, and being able to constantly evolve it and change it and do so on and so forth in the cloud as easily. Or there's a couple things that kind of do it, but A, they're complex, and B, they're expensive. Like to do that, and C, little buggy. I won't name names, but we've done some stuff where they did some stuff that we didn't expect it to, and I was like, we paid a lot of money for that, or we would pay a lot of money if we were. So we were demoing some software, and because they demo it, I'm not going to mention the name, but it was a pretty big piece of software, and it was less stable than I expected for that price. Go ahead, John.
So I keep having this battle in my head, and I'm glad Jason's here, because I think of distributed networking like the Bitcoin network, which has no servers running in the cloud, right? And so our team doesn't do any of the cloud. We don't do any cloud production at all. We all use our individual machines. So would you rather have stuff in the cloud, or would you rather have a distributed network of guys that have, $100,000 worth of gear in their homes? And so it's going to be interesting to see that evolve over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Next one, our last one on the queue this morning, comes from Douglas Carmichael. Wouldn't it be better to have an external mix engine like an Allen and Heath D-Live or X32 rack than a VBM, because you can control it from Isadora or Universe or other control systems?
Well, I think that's the question there is could we control this one eventually in that way? But I think you're right. In addition to being in the cloud, where we're going with what we're doing is it has to be something that has an API. Like I don't know. So when we think about all the cloud stuff, the other thing that we're adding to it is not only does your software have to run in the cloud, but it has to have all the hooks that we're going to control from Universe. And if it doesn't have that, it's not going to be viable for us anyway. But vMix, for instance, is a good example of something that does have all those hooks. So, but I haven't seen, again, audio. I haven't seen that yet. Next question. Oh, sorry, Andy, before I.
Oh, no, I was just going to kind of piggyback on that too. It's just, as an audio engineer, I'm going to be throwing out my paradigm of what it means to mix with the tools that I'm used to, which are hardware based. When we go to the cloud, it's really like I mean, the nice thing about Harrison is that they do have things that look like analog mixers virtually. So at least you can work on that end of the thing. But the back end of it, you know, what's behind it, I've also got to understand. And that's where there's a learning curve.
Well, and I also feel like we're still limited by the fact that we want it to look like what we saw before. So, you know,
Exactly.
for me, the perfect mixer that is not made yet is the one that is a nodal mixer, similar to like something like the 806, where I can just put sliders in. I can define sliders, and then I have all the mixing engine that I just have, and I just draw lines, you know, a little bit like Sienna, but better. And you draw all the wires, but I got a bunch of sliders, I got a bunch of inputs, I got a bunch of outputs, and what I do with them in between. And I can take this slider and put it into here. I can, you know, when you think of it from a nodal compositor, like for stuff that I've been doing for 20 years, once you get into nodes, you just go, I don't understand why we don't like, and again, that's because audio engineers aren't used to that. They're used to layers. It's like talking to an After Effects person. Talking about Nuke to an After Effects person is like, you know, talking about fourth dimension. You know, like, you know, it's just like they don't understand, like, I can't see that, you know, and I don't know how I would do that with layers. And anybody who comes from nodes looks at After Effects and you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? You know, you're not, you know, like, I don't understand how I would get anything done, you know, here. And so on real composites, like nobody does I mean, people do great graphics compositing and they do good compositing in After Effects, but once people start to do heavy lifting, they immediately move to nodes. You know, so in the same way, you know, I think that there's a revolution that's wanting to happen someday that is a nodal engine, mixing engine. And you see pieces of it. You see people kind of play with it, but then they stop somewhere, and then they stopped here. And, you know, someday we'll get the whole thing. Go ahead, Guy. Oh, sorry. Next question.
Yeah, we had this late. George Kennedy asked specifically for Guy's opinion, can we still depend 100% on 100% cloud production?
Yeah, usually I don't pay attention to my Discord while I'm in the show, but it was just going bananas. And so I glanced over, and turns out you couldn't log into the AWS console, and people were completely freaking out. So you couldn't start up an instance unless you had it already running, or there might have been a way to do it through the CLI. I didn't dig deep enough into it, but I would say you can't 100% guarantee that the cloud's going to be up. I do have a Google Cloud as well, where I'm running NDI, and I have allocated GPUs to me, so that's my backup. I also am starting to just look at we have a Comcast with a business account, so I'm looking at that SLA where, you know, we have guaranteed uptime and we have a backup, and so I'm starting to look more at just like getting some Dells and putting them at our office because we have a generator, we have big UPSs, and we're ready to rock and roll. But I mean, I've fallen in love with the cloud because of the depreciation of these. If I would have bought the, the machines that I wanted to buy, it would have been really expensive. But to use them in the cloud for $1.25 is pretty cool, and I need 7 of them. So it's been nice playing, but I'm a little more scared now than ever after seeing what happened this morning.
Yeah, George.
So Alex, it's not a running joke, but I've been saying lately to all the folks on the back end, this is the reason Alex says we use hardware. It's definitely, for me personally, I'm not 100% into the cloud right now, but there's been some, and we haven't talked about it openly, and I think we're due for AWS. There's been some, for me, major issues with availability, and folks that are invested in the cloud right now are probably taking a second look at doing instances and doing a whole production on AWS, because it's been hard. Right now, folks are having to get instances in Ohio, California, versus the DC area here. So it's a little bit scary right now. We're not talking about it because obviously folks are invested. Some of us are invested in the cloud, but for me, it's problematic not to be able to get on to the instances or get onto the AWS backend.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of it has to do also with logistics. I think we get lazy about administering stuff ahead of time. You know, so a lot of the stuff that I found with the cloud that gets us is, I want to do something at the last minute and I can't get resources. Whereas we did a lot of production a year ago in the cloud, and a lot of what we did there was, man, we would get ahead of it. like as soon as we knew, we were allocating resources, you know, and making sure that they were all ready to go. and making sure that we got a check ahead of time, and it was going to get paid no matter what. No matter what happens, we're going to start lighting those things up and starting to commit to them. But that's what you do in physical production too. It's just that in cloud production, we got used to like, oh, I can just turn this on, and I do that every day with office hours. I mean, just turn on and assume that Media Live is going to be there to do that. But anyway, yeah. So I think that it's we did, and I think that I do think that the cloud is the future. So I just want to make sure it's clear. Like, I'm using hardware right now. I think that eventually we'll do this all in the cloud. Like, I don't have any question that this is all going to go away from our hardware. It's just that how do we hand that off carefully, and I love the saying that, one step ahead, you're a leader, 2 steps ahead, you're a martyr. So you just have to be, as we go out there, we just always have to do it, very carefully and think about, risk is the chance of something going wrong multiplied to the consequence, and so when you can have a small risk, but if the consequence is really high, as that risk changes only fractionally, the risk, as that chance of something going wrong changes fractionally against a high risk, or against a high consequence, then that risk goes up exponentially. So you just need to be very careful of what you put in the cloud right now, because to your point, like, no one's ever done this before, and we keep on we're adding exponential weight to the cloud, and there's there's issues with hardware, bandwidth, all kinds of other stuff as we figure it out. Go, Jason.
I love the cloud. I've been paid to participate.
Cloud's a friend of yours.
Oh yeah, let me just tell you about my boy, the cloud.
Yeah,
exactly. He's a very lovely cloud, very cumulus, and at the end of the day, I still use my hardware when it's my deal and my butt on the line. I use my hardware.
Yeah, very good. All right. It's a good conversation. We unexpected, but we made it all the way through, and a lot of great questions, a lot of great conversation. Thank you to our producers for pulling it up and creating them. We still hit our basically 50 questions that we usually run it as an average. So really well done, and of course, thank you to the panel for adding all the knowledge that you add back into the group. I really appreciate all of you. And now we're going to jump into after hours. We do have NeuroNet tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. And remember, tomorrow at 9, we're doing, tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, we're doing the Isadora Labs at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard, not 2 p.m. All right, now we're going to jump into after.